and y'all enjoy.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being here today. We're excited to share with you about the Forensic Center of Excellence and our amazing adult forensic interviewing program. We first wanted to go over really the Forensic Center of Excellence and all the different programs that we offer here. Our CEO, Dr. Kara Breeden, started this nonprofit organization March of 2019. She's a forensic nurse by trade and saw a gap in services for victims of violence, especially victims of violence having the opportunity to obtain a SANE exam, and so wanted to bridge that gap. And she originally started the Texas Forensic Nurse Examiners as a group of trained forensic nurses that worked within the community and surrounding communities to help victims of violence have access to those exams. So we're going to highlight to start some of our programs, and then we'll move into adult forensic interviewing.
So the Forensic Center is a 24/7 victim service center that offers a variety of services, including medical forensic exams, advocacy, adult forensic interviews, counseling, and legal support.
Before we begin, we wanted to introduce ourselves. So my name is Micala Clark. I'm the legal counsel and director of our adult forensic interviewing program. I joined the team in December of 2020, but prior to that, I was a prosecutor in the Harris County District Attorney's Office. I was in the sex crimes division for a majority of my time there, handling human trafficking and child exploitation cases. And it was really neat to see this program really begin June of 2020, the adult forensic interviewing program, because I got to see it as a prosecutor and then now getting to lead it as the director. It's been really amazing to be a part of this incredible program and see how it's helped victims and helped strengthen these investigations.
And I'm Jen Peuplie. I joined this wonderful team in October of 2019. My professional career has involved advocacy with victims of crime, victims, survivors, witnesses of crime. I had the honor of beginning in a hospital setting, worked in the emergency room, mom, baby, pediatrics, worked with some very sensitive cases. And then my career took me to advocacy. And then ultimately with this a wonderful opportunity to conduct adult forensic trauma-informed interviews for victims of crime.
So we'll begin first and just explain our forensic nursing services and program. So like I said earlier, this began in March of 2019. Dr. Breeden saw a gap in services for victims of violence, and so she created Texas Forensic Nurse Examiners. And we just wanted to highlight that forensic nursing really encompasses so many different types of victimizations. It's not solely sexual assault victims, but also victims of elder abuse, interpersonal violence, human trafficking, child abuse, legal nursing, consulting. A big part of what our forensic nurses do is go and testify in court. And so consulting with prosecutors, consulting with other attorneys that utilize their expertise in court to strengthen cases is a big part of what they do. We also do psychiatric nursing. And then another interesting aspect of forensic nursing is suspect exams. Our nurses have performed suspect exams in order to collect DNA evidence to help strengthen those cases as well. So not only are our nurses performing, exams on sexual assault victims, but they're also doing so much more. And so we just wanted to highlight all the different victimizations that they see. We are currently, we have 2 freestanding clinic locations where victims of violence can come and have a exam done in one of those environments. We have our main office here located at Richmond and Kirby in Harris County, Texas. Then we also have a clinic space in Fort Bend County which is a county surrounding or bordering Harris County. And our clinic spaces are just a really soft environment, very victim-centered. It's not chaotic like a hospital setting is. We really, if our victims are not needing immediate medical attention, that would require a doctor on site, if they had broken bones or things like that, bleeding, obviously we would direct them to one of our hospital partners. But if we can, we prefer to bring them to this clinic setting. It's just much calmer, very trauma informed. So you have those two clinic settings here. And then we also have 48 partner locations. We are the service provider for all HCA and CHI hospital systems. And then we have several other freestanding clinics. We're covering 12 different counties. So these counties touch Harris County, and then some touch counties touching Harris County. So our nurses drive quite the distance to meet victims where they're at and perform those medical forensic exams. And I would say that's probably one of our biggest mottos, is to really meet victims where we're at and make sure that we're serving them in their community. And so being able to have mobile forensic nurses and have all these partner locations enables us to really treat victims and make sure that they're getting the services that they need in their community. So our nurses are 24/7. This is our hotline number. If you press 1, you will be immediately directed to a forensic nurse. No one, not a receptionist, but a forensic nurse will answer. And they will staff the call to determine whether the victim needs to be brought to the hospital where they'll meet them, or if they can come to our clinic setting. We're really proud to say that we have a 90-minute response time, which is really important. You know, covering 12 counties, and Harris County alone is quite large. So, and being able to really stick true to that 90-minute response time and make sure that the victim's being seen as soon as we receive the call is pretty incredible.
So one of our programs, in addition to forensic nursing, involves advocacy. We are very fortunate to have wonderful advocates on site that can take care of supportive resources, connecting our victims and survivors and witnesses of violence to be able to connect them back with their community. One of our advocates is a licensed practical counselor, and she actually is able to provide counseling services at our main location for free to victims of violence that we take care of here and provide forensic services to. The role of an advocate is so important in so many different ways. Our advocates are able to provide immediate crisis intervention, be able to make sure that the victims and survivors of the crime are aware of their options, and everything that the advocates do with our victims and witnesses of crime is very trauma informed. We do have a soft interview room that we use to be able to speak with our survivors prior to the exam, so that that survivor is being treated as a human being, and it's not always all about the exam. The advocates, of course, will address safety concerns, immediate needs, shelter, connection to domestic violence shelters, if that is what the survivor is asking for, and as well as connecting that person back to his or her community. Our licensed practical counselor, Caitlin, does have a counseling program within our forensic center, and she is able to offer counseling services to anyone who is a part of our program. The counseling services are about a 50-minute session. They're once a week, and that survivor or victim presents here to our main office, and she has a separate counseling space that is separate from our forensic interviewing and our forensic nursing space, that allows that survivor to be able to hopefully feel at ease and feel safe and be able to access counseling services right away. Many times with our community partners, because of everything that's going on with our community, with COVID, with the increase in violence, sometimes finding a counseling appointment is very difficult, and there can be a wait. And this is another way that our company is able to support victims and witnesses and survivors of crime to eliminate the barrier of a waiting time.
And so we also created our legal advocacy section of our organization, which I am a part of, the sole person, the one legal advocate, but also saw a gap in services for victims of violence regarding legal advocacy. And so I offer free legal assistance for our victims, really help them understand the criminal justice system. A lot of times this is the first interaction they've ever had with the criminal justice system, and they're confused and wanting to know what the future will look like. I know especially in Harris County, when I was a prosecutor, it was really hard to talk to victims 3 years later and try to explain to them why it's taken so long. So that's really one of my roles as a legal advocate from the beginning, is to really set expectations, just to set their expectations that it's going to be a long road ahead, and the case might not actually get to trial until 2 to 3 years down the road, but to just provide them with, updates and encouragement. And also a lot of times my role is reaching out to prosecutors in the office and investigators and making sure that they're being held accountable and doing their part, and that the victim's voice is being heard. Some other services that I offer: civil protective orders. We have a Project 180 pretrial diversion program for prostitution Class B cases that we have an MOU with the Harris County District Attorney's Office. And so a lot of our clients that we've seen through the adult forensic interviewing program have prior prostitution criminal history, and that inhibits them from obtaining gainful employment. So some of my duties are helping them get those cases expunged off their record so that they can then go on and obtain employment. And another aspect of that are petitions for non-disclosure. So those are for more serious felony cases, but also helping them try to move on and move on with their lives. So those are other services that we offer here. But we'll get into why you're really here. Our adult forensic interviewing program. So this began June of 2020, and it was really an instrumental effort with the Harris County District Attorney's Office. Jonna Stallings, the chief over human trafficking and adult sex crimes over there. She and our CEO, Dr. Kara Breeden, also saw a gap in services for these adult victims to really have a trauma-informed opportunity to share what happened to them. I know when I was a prosecutor, especially with our human trafficking victims that were adults, they normally didn't stick around by the time the case went to trial because of how they were treated a lot of times at the beginning of the case, having patrol officers interviewing them on the side of the road right after their pimp had beat them and they're still in their clothing from that night, and not really taking into account what the situation is, and maybe this isn't the best time or place to be interviewing this victim, or maybe they are a victim even though I just saw them commit an act of prostitution. So really taking into account everything that's going on and take a step back and then give them the opportunity to share what happened to them in a trauma-informed environment with individuals with a background in advocacy and social services. And so I know as a prosecutor, I was so excited when I heard that this program launched, because I thought this was going to be a way that these individuals were going to be treated like humans from the beginning, and then have an opportunity to share what happened to them and hopefully not have to be re-traumatized by sharing their story over and over again. This really resonated with me. I tried a compelling prostitution case in the Harris County DA's office, and my victim was an adult, and she was an exceptional witness. She had been out of the life for 2 years and had really gotten her life back on track and was doing incredible. And I thought she testified so well, and we got a very quick not guilty back from the jury. And when we went back to talk to them, they told me that my victim was really flat and she didn't seem very upset that this had happened to her, and so they didn't believe her. And looking back at my case and really reanalyzing everything, I realized that my victim had shared her story with 6 different prosecutors. And that was only the prosecutors that she shared her story with. So you can imagine how many investigators and friends and family that she had to continually tell what happened to her. And so since that case, I've been very, very excited to have a way where this individual can have a trauma-informed interview that's audio and video recorded that can then serve as a memorialization of what happened, and that we're not forced to have to ask her and re-traumatize her for the next 3 years about this incident and this terrible day or time period in her life. So that's my soapbox, but we'll continue on. So this is our team. So like we talked about, I'm the legal counsel and AFI program director. Jen's our forensic interview manager. And then we also have Sydney Morris and Danny Hernandez, who are 2 of our forensic interviewers. So we have 3 forensic interviewers that are amazing, trauma-informed, and have a background in victim services. We have 2 forensic interviewing rooms on site here at our location at Richmond and Kirby in Harris County. And we wanted to go through with you what an adult forensic interview is. So it's quite similar to a children's forensic interview. However, we serve adults. So we have different MOUs with the counties that use us to determine the age that we interview these adult victims. So in Harris County, it's 17 and older, and then in Montgomery County and in Fort Bend County, it's 19 and older. So encourage you, if you ever want to create one of these programs, to collaborate with your local district attorney's office, as well as your children's CACs, and making sure that you're collaborative and all working together to not to stay in your lane and make sure that you're serving the population that everyone, an age group, everyone is comfortable with, because it's really a group effort and everyone should be working together to help these victims. But an interview is a neutral, non-judgmental, fact-finding, investigative interview. We collaborate with law enforcement from the very beginning. Our interviews, like I said, are audio and video recorded. And prior to those interviews, we have a call with law enforcement where we get a brief background on victimization. What are we looking at for this interview? But it's brief. And then the participant, so either a victim or witness of a crime, normally arrives on location and we conduct the interview. And then around 2/3 or a good stopping point in the interview, our interviewers step out and call law enforcement to follow up on any questions that they need to ask. And then they'll step back into the interview and conclude it. And then that interview is then given over to law enforcement or the DA's office. So again, it applies similar principles to our children's forensic interviews. All of our forensic interviewers have a background in victim services, they're advocates or social workers. So they really come from a trauma-informed background when they're working with these different participants. They are audio and video recorded, and we're very collaborative with law enforcement or the district attorney's office from that very beginning, because it is an investigative interview. And it's needed because it is hopefully not re-traumatizing the victim. It'll improve information gathering and strengthen these cases when they go to trial and go forward with the prosecution of them. And we really, again, another motto is a victim-centered approach in everything we do. And so making sure that that victim is treated in a trauma-informed manner from the very beginning.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about how an adult forensic interview is conducted and some of the things from a trauma-informed perspective that we do here at the Forensic Center that is different from other environments that a victim may encounter. So right as the victim presents to our office, we do call the victim, or the participant the night before, and making sure that they have the address and a way to arrive here and any questions they may have. And then when we greet the victim, that same interviewer greets the victim or the participant, if you will. And we have a saying, rapport at the door. So the rapport building begins right away, and meeting their basic needs of food, water, making sure that they're safe right away before we even step into the interview room. We give the participant a tour of our suite so they see the different interview rooms, and we always kind of try to lighten the mood as much as we can. Many times our participants are nervous and nervous to what it could be in their minds. We have found after talking to many of our participants that everyone watches too many CSI crime shows, that the participant has in their head a very dark room, a two-way mirror that would have people on the other side that may or may not be supportive, a very bright spotlight. So we always talk to our participants beforehand, show them the room, which is very calm, very serene, minimizing distractions. And we work with that person from the very beginning, and you can just see that person's shoulders begin to relax. And then we also show our participant what other services are in the office, our trauma-informed interview room, the forensic nursing piece, to try to open those conversations up and have in their mind that if they do need a forensic exam, that we can talk about that in the forensic interview. So once the participant is ready, we will walk into the forensic interview room. The participant knows right away that they are being recorded, and they do sign a consent. And that is a very important process so that that person knows that this is their choice. And in the consent, we talk about that the interview is being recorded and will be shared with their investigative team. And we really are there to answer any questions. If we only have one interview going at a time, we're able to actually offer that participant a choice of interview rooms. Again, trying very hard to give the power back to the participant. Something has occurred that the power has been taken away. And we are very much all about giving that participant as many choices as she or he is able to have at that time, and connecting and spending time with that person, getting to know them as a person prior to going into the investigative questions. Throughout the interview, we are watching the participant and monitoring their trauma. As Micala mentioned, all of us have a background in victim services, and we are making sure that that person is managing okay throughout the interview. We are able to take breaks throughout the interview, drink water, snacks, a coffee, whatever that person needs to make sure that they feel safe and that they can continue going through what they need to discuss with us. And many times it is highly sensitive information, and it is traumatic information that they're sharing. Some of the things we've heard our participants say, and I actually conduct interviews as well, is that they felt heard, that they felt relaxed, and that they really appreciated the opportunity to share what happened. And many times the recording actually makes the person feel even more secure about being heard. As interviewers, we are taking notes throughout the interview on an electronic device. We explain to the participant that those notes are non-clinical in nature, and that those notes are non-secretive and can be shown to the participant at any time. And what I've found is many of our participants actually feel even more safe with us taking notes. That increases how they feel about being heard and being listened to, and decreases re-traumatization. And again, we are expressing empathy to our participants and checking in with that person throughout the interview to make sure that they're doing okay.
And just looking at these photos, the top left photo is one of our forensic interview rooms. So we try to have soft lighting, a painting or something soft colors in the room, comfortable chairs. And then on the bottom left, that's and bottom right, that's where law enforcement sits to watch the forensic interviews if they decide to come on site to watch them. We do have the option, due to COVID, we had to adapt since we started right in the heat of COVID. And so we have the option to send our law enforcement or prosecutor, whoever is watching the forensic interview, a live link through a secure secure live link to allow them to watch the interview from their desk. And that's really helped allow the victims to still come and share their story and not be put off because the law enforcement officer couldn't present in person for the forensic interview. And that secure live link is then it is sent to the prosecutor or to that investigator, and they review it. I don't know if I mentioned this, but we have to have a law enforcement officer or a prosecutor watch these interviews as they're happening live. That's one of our requirements and very important. If the victim begins disclosing different crimes that have been committed against them, we want to make sure law enforcement is listening so that appropriate charges are filed in a timely manner, or that prosecutor as well. So these are the different types of victimizations that we see. We have a lot of domestic violence, strangulation cases, sexual assault. We have seen an increase in adults molested as children. A lot of adults have come forward, and we've had some who were abused 30 years ago and finally feel like they can share their story in a safe place. And so we've seen quite a few of those cases. Human trafficking as well is a great amount of our participants that come and have forensic interviews conducted. Labor trafficking, and then we call them participants because we also want to be inclusive of our witnesses to crimes. We do interview quite a few witnesses of crimes, so when we're saying participants, we're wanting to be inclusive and including those other victimizations that we see here.
So building a rapport with the participant is one of the most important beginning steps of the forensic interview. We can see throughout the forensic interview that in this rapport building time that the participant is actually evaluating whether or not she or he feels safe. And what tells us that is their body language, their relaxation of their shoulders, their eye contact. So building that rapport with that person is very important. Meeting that person where they're at emotionally and physically in their moment, to talk to them about presenting the opportunity for them to share what happened to them in a safe space that is non-judgmental. We will know a little bit about the situation prior to the person arriving. And we also make sure that we address with that person that their citizenship in our country is not an issue for the forensic interview or accessing any of those services. And you can see when we address this issue, that person may be feeling their shoulders again to begin to relax. The gender orientation, the sexual orientation, what someone believes or doesn't believe, we address those issues as well, and making sure that person knows that they're in a non-judgmental space. Many of the ladies that we interview have been in the world of prostitution, and then they have been trafficked. And many of things that they have to share talks about prostitution or their line of work, involving escort services and whatnot. And again, as the forensic interviewers, we make sure that that person feels that this is a place of non-judgment. This is a place that is safe, that they can share what's happening to them. Many times with an adult, it is very nice. We have some choices. So many times we'll have someone that comes in and they have that need to share what happened to them straight away. So we have to go through a few things to keep in mind, but then we actually are able to give that person a choice, that we can get to know each other a little bit, talk about, common interests, hobbies, how someone likes to spend their free time, or that person, if they have that need to share what happened to them because of their nerves straight away, we can go into that. And as we present that choice to the participant that we have the honor of working with, you can see, again, it's giving the control back to that person. The consent process that we go through that's under recording is giving the control back to the person. The rapport building and giving the choice to be able to get to know each other a little bit, or if it's better for that person to go ahead and start right in with what happened to them, giving that choice back. It's all a part of our trauma-informed interview to see best how we can handle. And through our rapport building and how someone shares, you know, a little bit about themselves if they choose to, it gives us an idea as the interviewer how that person best communicates. So it is a wonderful opportunity for both the interviewer and for the participant. So a little bit about the adult forensic interview. I'd like to walk us through this. So it begins with collaboration with the investigative team. I have been an advocate for many years, and so the option to report or non-report for adults is something that took me a little while to transition to with adult forensic interviewing. So with adult forensic interviewing, the referrals will always come to us through a reporting situation. And that reporting situation is the investigative team. Our investigative teams involve federal, state, and local PDs that we work with. And we will receive that referral from the investigative team, and then we go from there. And they are able to schedule with us, and then we can speak with that investigative team to see how best to contact the participant. It many times might be the law enforcement officer contacting that person to come in, or the investigative team may direct us to reach out to the participant, but it's immediate collaboration with that investigative team right from the beginning. Again, the option to report or not report when you have an adult forensic interview is not there. So that's why we are working with the investigative team straight from the very beginning. We have a phased interview structure with adult forensic interviewing. And what that means is there's flexibility throughout the interview, especially to extend the life of the interview. And what that means is towards the end of our forensic interview, when we're talking about connection to advocacy and connection to supportive community resources and making those referrals, many times after a forensic interview, one's memory may remember additional very important details after that person finishes the interview and goes to their next place. And so with an adult forensic interview, similar to children's interviews, there is an option to conduct a follow-up interview, and that extends the life of the interview. Through that follow-up interview, it would be our goal to discuss the new information that participant remembers, and hopefully not to walk that person back through the trauma that they've already been so brave enough to share with us. And so that's what it means by having a phased interview structure and extending the life of the interview is through a follow-up interview. And through our follow-up interviews, we would have the same interviewer connect and be able to conduct that interview. That same interviewer has already built a rapport, and that person would come in again. A new consent would be signed, and then that person would share with us what it is that they needed to share with us through that second interview, and we would go from there. Again, law enforcement is involved straight from the beginning. Many times throughout the interview, someone's memory can be blocked. The trauma can do many different things with our memories. And so after we rapport build, we let the person know that many times we are doing, the interviewer is doing much of the talking in the very beginning. We are guiding the interview as far as the expectations. We share with the person some of the things and the expectations that will happen throughout the interview. And then there's a switch in the interview where the person then, you can see it on their face and their shoulders relax. It's time for the person, should they feel safe, to share what happened or their personal account and why and what brought us together that day. And then the interviewer takes an active listening role, and she is right there with that person listening, taking notes, and then the participant then is talking and doing all of the talking. What's very important in the adult forensic interview, especially in this phase, is that the interviewer is not interrupting. Interrupting somebody can absolutely halt their memory and their sequence of events, as well as create doubt, that the interviewer may be doubting some of the things that that person is saying. So our role during when that person is sharing what happened is to remain quiet, active listening, reassuring through nodding techniques, and to be there with that person in that moment will have already built rapport. Hopefully the participant will already feel safe and not judged, and they share what happened to them. After they've shared what happened to them, the interviewer's role will be to go back and clarify some of those details that we know are important parts of the investigation that corroborate what happened. And many times when we clarify those details, we'll have to use alternate retrieval techniques because we know that we need some deeper, more detailed information. Many times what that involves with context recreation is walking that person back emotionally and psychologically back what happened. What some of the things that we'll say is, okay, walk me back through what happened when you were in the room. What did you hear? What did you smell? What was going on? And we'll ask questions of that nature to be able to mentally place that person back in that environment so that additional detail will be remembered that will really support and corroborate the facts as to what was happening at that time. We'll let the participant know that the concentration is very important and that to work as hard as she or he can to concentrate during that time. And what's really important during an interview, I know in conversations and everyday conversations, pauses are awkward. You know, you kind of want to fill that space with talking, if you will. In a forensic interview, the pause is actually very, very important. It can feel like the pause is forever, but it's very important to pause and to allow that person to think. You will actually see that person's eyes go side to side or look up as they're thinking about, trying very hard to think about what happened. And that's a part of the focused concentration techniques, is allowing that person time and encouraging that person to really think back to what happened. Another retrieval method that is used when we are fact-finding and clarifying detail is a multiple retrieval attempts. And these attempts and these theories are from a wonderful book and authors from Fisher and Geiselman. And this multiple retrieval attempt is really talking about the 2 or 3 different ways through sensory, through ear, through what you heard, what you saw, what you smelled, going really attacking and it's retrieving that memory in those ways through what did you see? Tell me what the person was saying while this was happening. What did you hear? What did they look like? Using different one of our sensories to really try to retrieve and open up that encoded memory. And those are some techniques that we do use through some of the clarifying techniques that we use during that phase of the interviewing. We also use very much open-ended questionings to be able to really unlock and exhaust that person's free memory recall. Open-ended questions are preferred by prosecution. They are non-leading. Some of the examples would be, tell me more about what happened. Tell me about what you remember from that moment. These questions are used to be able to, again, exhaust that person's memory as to what happened without that person thinking about what the interviewer is wanting. Many times when we're asking the person to describe the person that they're talking about, instead of saying, tell me about what his tattoo or her tattoo look like, we ask the person, tell me about the body markings. Tell me about any piercings. We will be using more general questions. Tell me about what their face looked like. And that way those questions are not leading, and those questions really do exhaust more memory from the person that we're talking to. The close-ended questions that we use are much more used to get very specific details. They can be yes or no questions. And ideally, when you're conducting an adult forensic interview, you want to switch between open and close-ended questions. If the interviewer asks too many yes/no questions, we can find ourselves backing ourselves into a corner and not allowing more conversation to occur. And sometimes those close-ended questions can appear a little bit leading. In any forensic interview, you want to suggestibility is something we have to be very careful of. So we have to be really mindful about asking too many questions that are close-ended or that place words into the person's, into the participant's mouth that she or he has not said yet. Another technique that we will use is to restate his or her words, then to be able to attain additional information. If the person has already said that they have been trafficked or identified who that pimp is, we are able to then to use their words and ask deeper questions about that person or about what happened, as that wouldn't be considered leading or suggestive in any way, because again, we are using the words that the participant has already stated. We do find often in the interview that that person's memory can be locked, and a wonderful tool that is used in the adult forensic interviewing is called free drawing. And that is where we actually hand the person a blank piece of paper and ask them to draw the apartment complex where they were sexually assaulted, or asking them to draw the cantina. What did the cantina look like where they have discussed that there are back rooms? And they will, and it doesn't matter if they're an artist or not. And the interviewer during that time stays quiet, again, not leading or inferencing any during that time. And we have found the free drawing to be a wonderful tool. We have had our participants actually draw the entire inside of the cantina, showing us where those back rooms are and showing us where everything is happening and who is sitting where. And it unlocks their memory. When they're drawing, many times our participants will explain what they're drawing, and the details will become so much more than what they remember to share only 2 minutes ago. It's a wonderful tool to use with the participant to help unlock the memory. We also present evidence. Our law enforcement partners will present a picture of the person who is suspected to have hurt the participant. And we will be able to show that picture. We are not doing photo arrays or lineups, but we are able to show pictures of individual pictures randomly. And it's important that we show that evidence at the right time during the interview. It's certainly not something that we start the interview out or that is done during rapport building. We are very careful to build trust with that person first and show that picture when we feel like the person is ready to look at that picture in the interview. And so we are able to show that. I have found that showing that evidence at the right time can also help unlock the memory of the person that we're talking with, as well as clearly identify who has hurt that person. And we work through that with our investigative team. After the person has shared what happened and the interviewer has confirmed all the facts that we feel that are important at that time, we take a break. We speak to law enforcement. It gives a participant a break to relax, use the restroom at any time, have additional snacks. The recording is still on always until the conclusion of the interview, and we'll check in with our investigative team. And then we will come back. There may or may not be a few additional questions. And then we conclude the interview by being very careful of our boundary of being a forensic interviewer and have already transitioned out of the role of advocacy, and inquiring if that person has a need for supportive resources and letting that person know what is available to them. Again, it's their choice. And after the interview, we do have an advocate and a licensed practical counselor that can then talk to that person about those supportive resources. And at that time, the interview has been concluded, the cameras are off, and the forensic interviewer has stepped out of the room and then done a soft handoff to the advocate and/or counselor. And those are the steps throughout the forensic interview.
Very, very detailed. So we've also instituted a teleforensic interview that we utilize quite a bit. I believe we've done over 70 teleforensic interviews. And this was another way to adapt and meet the victims where they're at, and especially in the time of COVID. So it's a forensic interview for victims who are unable to present in person. We've done teleforensic interviews all over the US. We've had a teleforensic interview of a participant in Canada and Australia, so internationally as well. And it really provides us another safe, neutral way for that individual to have a trauma-informed interview. Our forensic interview team typically will work with law enforcement to find a safe, neutral location for that individual, that participant, to go to have the TFI. The CACs around the US have been incredible in opening up their doors and allowing our participants to go there to have the teleforensic interview and setting them up with a computer. We use the Zoom platform, and how it works is our forensic interviewer and the participant Zoom in, as well as the law enforcement investigative team member. We ask the investigative team member to turn their camera off. And so it's really a conversation between the forensic interviewer and the participant. We also check in with the participant prior to the TFI to make sure that they feel safe, they have access to the technology they need. Any other questions surrounding the TFI, the forensic interview team addresses. And we've seen this a lot with our human trafficking survivors who have relocated and left the county where the abuse and the trafficking occurred. And so our teleforensic interviews have been a way for them to share their story in a safe environment and location. I think Jen can also talk about they feel more comfortable.
They do. They really do. We have found that that the participant actually has a feeling of safety and control behind the computer screen. We have found that the teleforensic interview has not interrupted rapport building at all. It actually has increased for some of our traffic survivors, as Micala was saying. That they're in fear of their safety, of being found out where they are. So the computer screen is a safety net for that person versus being face to face with a worry that their trafficker has tracked them or found them in any way coming into our building. So the TFI has been an amazing tool. Micala has really helped us to create a consent that where the victim or the participant is not recording as we are recording. We go over all of those things to protect their confidentiality in every way. We make sure that they have access to technology. And then also, if the participant decides to have their teleforensic interview at a neutral location, which would be an advocacy center, a domestic violence shelter, the YW or YMCA, then that person, if they want to connect with supportive resources, that advocacy agency is right there. So it's been wonderful. We had conducted a human trafficking interview for someone in a rural area in West Virginia, and a YWCA was really close to his or her zip code, and they actually provided supportive resources, an office for that person to have the forensic interview, a safe location, and then after that, they offered that person supportive resources, and we actually heard from that person afterwards, and she felt very supported pre-interview and post-interview. And so that was a wonderful example, and the connectivity and collaboration with our partners throughout the US has been wonderful. So we have found the TFI to be very, very useful. They are using the TFI with children ages 12 and older. So it's been a wonderful tool. Maybe we can even say it was a silver lining from COVID.
Right. And again, just really meeting the victim where they're at and in their community. And so connecting them, like Jen said, with those supportive resources right in their community has been instrumental, and just really neat to see everyone coming together to support these victims all over the US and the world. So we also think it's really important as part of a adult forensic interview program to have an MDT. We actually have an MDT that meets once a month. It's very important. It should be part of any AFI program. And our MDT includes our forensic interviewers, law enforcement, prosecutors, victim advocates. If there's a mental health client that we've seen, mental health is included. If there was a medical forensic exam, we make sure that one of the nurses is here during the MDT to share anything that they believe is important and relevant when we were discussing that participant. And we've really seen it improve the information sharing between different agencies. I know one of our first MDTs we saw that this victim was in need of services, and were able to connect that victim with an advocacy agency, and that connection enabled that victim to then go on and get those services that they were in need of. It also coordinates the law enforcement piece with the prosecutor, so it allows the law enforcement officers to have direct access to the prosecutors and share the information that they gathered from these adult forensic interviews with that prosecutor, and so hopefully seeking justice for that victim. And really, yeah, it's an opportunity to ensure that follow-up services are being provided to the participant that we've seen here. So it's a great tool. We love it. We typically discuss around 8 to 10 participants per MDT. And like I said, we meet once a month with our team members.
It's wonderful to be able to have everybody in one place at one time with everybody's busy schedule, and really keeping the participant at the center of the conversation. Peer review is very important. It is a standard of practice within the forensic interviewing world, both with children and adults. We use best practices where we have an ongoing peer review monthly. We will select a topic. One of the many times the topic is related to one of the victimizations that we are seeing and taking care of and addressing. We will have a guest speaker, a scholarly article, and there'll be 2 interviews that are reviewed, and that it is a learning environment. It is a way for the interviewers to develop and talk about our interviewing skills. Our guest speakers have included law enforcement, human trafficking, vice and detectives, prosecutors, experts in the field with strangulation, as well as with special populations and special communities, including BDSM, delayed outcries, where victims were hurt as children and now they're adults, and how to manage that in the interview. Peer review is a wonderful time and highly important to any forensic interview program, for the team to be able to come together, talk about things that are happening, stay to a topic that's related to that month, and really review those interviews from a healthy standpoint. It is not a report card. Certainly, it's not a time for any of that. It's a time to grow and develop better questions. It's a time to grow and develop maybe different strategies, or hearing insight from our investigative team, our prosecutors, our specialists in the field. It is, peer review is probably one of our team's favorite times to be together and really to talk about things. And it's a very important part of best practices for any forensic interview program, especially the adult forensic interview program. We have learned a lot through peer review. Our speaker last month was actually BDSM. He was a gentleman from Colorado who Zoomed in, and he is an expert in the field and really helped our team to develop better questions surrounding consent and surrounding some of the things that may happen, and ultimately will hopefully aid in the filing of charges and working with our prosecutors as well.
We also think it's very important for an AFI program to develop protocols so that everyone's on the same page from the beginning. Like I mentioned, this is a collaborative effort when the inception of an AFI program is on the horizon, to be collaborative with your district attorney's office, CACs. Some issues that should be addressed from the beginning are chain of custody. So who has ownership over the adult forensic interview? How does that work when transferring that forensic interview over to the prosecutor or the investigative team? Storage of the adult forensic interview is crucial as well, making sure that it's secure. trying to determine age range of participants, again, collaborative effort with your district attorney's office and CACs, and then how to present evidence during the adult forensic interview. That also needs to be discussed with your investigative team and the prosecutor about how that adult forensic interviewer should present the evidence, what type of evidence they can present in an adult forensic interview. Also establishing priority levels. So if the adult forensic interviewer needs to come in after hours, what type of participant would that priority level meet? And so making sure that those are all addressed in protocols, as well as how peer review should work, who should be involved in the MDTs. So just encourage, if you're thinking of creating an AFI program, to make sure that those protocols are discussed from the beginning, that they're right, that they're written out, that everyone is on the same page. And so there's consistency among the different members of the group.
And at the beginning of our program, we didn't have Micala Clark with us right away. She was prosecuting with the district attorney's office, and we had a direct line into the prosecuting attorney's office, the district attorney's office, and that relationship is critical, ongoing, as well as at the startup of the program. And we are honored and lucky enough to have Micala on our team now. As the manager of the program, it was very difficult to have the background and the knowledge of all of these things that Micala is talking about, chain of custody, storage, and things that really are at the level of the district attorney's office and with a prosecutor. So having that relationship at the very beginning, and ideally having a prosecutor on your own staff as an advocate that can help direct the program, is absolutely an asset and something that I would highly recommend. Okay, so I'd like to share a case study with this group that was an amazing opportunity for us to be able to be involved in. So this was a situation that we were contacted by the Texas Alcohol and Beverage Commission to be able to conduct interviews with victims of human trafficking that worked as prostitutes in a cantina in the Houston area. So we were initially contacted and conducted these interviews starting back in 2020. And our first participant came to us. This was advertised that to see if anybody had any information about this case through a local Spanish channel. And she had the courage and was brave to come forward and reached out to TABC. And she was our first victim that we conducted a forensic interview with. Her native language is Spanish, and that was the language she was comfortable talking to us in. And so we had an interpreter with us in the interview room at the same time conducting the interview. And she described with us what happened to her 17 years prior to this case coming to light and being able to come forward, that she was trafficked by the same people that were currently trafficking women currently. And she shared what happened to her and the crossing from the country that she was living in, which happened to be Mexico, into our country, that was paid for by the current trafficker, and what happened to her. And if you remember, we talked about free drawing a few slides ago. In her interview, I asked her to draw a picture of the cantina, and I didn't know as the interviewer how consistent and what a pinnacle point in the interview that would be, because the first victim drew the cantina that she worked under 17 years prior to this case coming out into the public. And then two more women came forward, worked for the same trafficker. I asked each woman individually to draw a free drawing of the cantina, and all three drawings were identical, and they were drawn under separate situations. And the three women were not in the same room, and to the best of my knowledge, did not know each other at that time. All three participants had forensic interviews. There was an interpreter in all interviews. The same team, it was myself and one of our other interviewers who served in an interpreter role for those interviews at that time. And we interviewed these three women at the same time, and they felt safe sharing the promises that were made to them. They were promised to come work as a barista, if you will, and managing the bar and whatnot. And then once they managed the bar and they came to the cantina and they were working here, it was then discovered that their extra duties that were not discussed in the beginning involved prostitution in 2 back rooms of this specific cantinas. And there were security officers to make sure that the women did go into the back room that worked in the cantina, as well as the trafficker sold the condoms for the cantina at the bar. One of the things that I remember most vividly about these interviews is all 3 women identified the traffickers, identified many of the people involved, which was the same across all 3 interviews. But one of the things, in addition to the layout of the cantina that was common, as well as where the condoms were kept and sold, where there were napkins that the ladies were required to purchase. They were white dessert napkins, if you will, that they were required to purchase for the aftermath of the activity in the back room. And all 3 women discussed those white napkins separately in the forensic interviews. Those are some of the similarities that we're seeing across all the interviews. Again, the napkins, the free drawing, as well as the perpetrators, they were all identified. There was extreme collaboration between Texas Alcohol and Beverage Commission, as well as with Homeland Security. The advocate with TBAC, which is the acronym for Texas Alcohol Beverage Commission, she was able to arrange with Homeland Security that all of these women were able to apply for proper work visas. And they were able to start to begin the process for the proper documentation so that they weren't forced or felt like they were forced to continue working in that role, that they actually had papers to be able to go and earn and apply for another job. It also, the women that we interviewed all felt safe, and they began to trust law enforcement and these agents. The agents went to their homes and picked them up with female agents as well, and with Spanish-speaking interpreters. And then the same agents then took these ladies to Homeland Security to apply for their visas. And I can only imagine what that would have felt like for these women to go to Homeland Security and have that trust, to be able to trust those officers to go and know that they were not being turned in or being deported or any of those actions. It was all positive interaction, and the women are now able to have choices to be able to apply for employment. But that is just a very special case study that I wanted to share with you, that will stay with our interview team for quite some time. And they were able to try and to bring charges against these people and file charges, the offenders that hurt them, and so that they're no longer living in fear.
Yeah, and that's the article that we have shared on the screen here. So incredible to bring justice to those victims. And a group effort, again, a collaborative effort between different agencies and different groups. So we wanted to just highlight this. Since the inception of the program, we've done over 500 interviews since June of 2020, yes. Over 70 TFI as well. And it's just incredible. These ladies are, I mean, they're incredible that they've done all of this, and really that's crazy to think how many interviews have been conducted since the inception of this program. So yeah,
I wouldn't imagine.
I know, and during COVID especially. So speaking again about collaboration, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing without the different agencies and partners that we work with on a daily basis. So really encouraging law enforcement that we're an added service, that we're not here to replace or take their jobs, that we're working with them throughout this entire process, really working with your local district attorney's offices to discuss those questions that will then go in your protocols, and also legal questions if you don't have an attorney on staff, having that connection to a district attorney's office so that you can ask any legal questions that come up. Our advocacy partners are incredible, that we can connect with them and refer out participants that we've seen to them. So ensuring that they're receiving those supportive community resources. And then of course, we always offer medical forensic exams to our participants to make sure that they feel like their bodies are safe and secure and checked out. So a lot of our participants will either have a medical forensic exam and then come in for the forensic interview, or vice versa, depending on scheduling. But giving them, again, that choice to have a medical forensic exam is huge. And then these are just some photos highlighting our community collaboration. Some of these are from, a lot of times we'll go out to the undercover sting ops with law enforcement. We have our nursing team there to provide medical forensic exams. And then sometimes we have our adult forensic interviewers there because we have mobile equipment to conduct mobile forensic interviews on site. We always make sure that we're in a safe and secure location. We have privacy, we have our own rooms, and just these are some highlights from different sting operations that we assisted with. Anything you want to add, Jay? Yeah, no, I didn't know. Yeah,
it's wonderful to be able to be on site and collaborate with our partners, and to be there if there's an outcry of trafficking, or if a victim or participant feels like they're ready to share what happened, that we're there if we need to. And our nursing is there as well, to be able to provide that opportunity to that victim to be able to make sure his or her body is okay. And we interact with advocacy on scene, and we have a lot of fun.
Yes, we do. We do. And speaking of collaboration and the impact that this has had, we actually had one of our partners that we love, Deputy Winters with the Harris County Sheriff's Office. She's going to step in momentarily and come and share her experience with you all. But really the impact we've seen is for the victim, an opportunity for them to build trust within the system and feel heard. And then law enforcement assist hopefully with increasing disclosures and filing charges in their cases. And then as the prosecutor, having the opportunity to increase charges and really prosecute these cases to the full extent. And we have Deputy Winters coming in. So. Hi, ladies. How are you? I'm well. So, like we mentioned earlier, this is Deputy Investigator Winters with the Harris County Sheriff's Office.
Hi.
And she's been kind enough to dedicate her time to come in and share her experience with you all about the program and how it's hopefully helped her in her investigations. And she's assigned to the Adult Sex Crimes Division of that office.
That's correct.
So
good morning. I think it's still morning, right?
Yeah.
Good morning, guys. I don't want to take too much of your time. I did just want to briefly speak in regards to how the adult forensic interview has impacted or helped, investigators in regards to our investigation as well as victims. And so I wrote down a few points. I hope you guys don't mind me referring to my notes. But I know that there are many things that we could talk about, but I narrowed it down just a few, okay? So for one, I love the fact that forensic interviews allows the investigator to give the victim a narrative, right? A narrative to speak in her own way, in her own words, in regards to the incident that, and I say her, but him as well, right? Because we can have male and female victims. But forensic interviews allow them to narrate their own incident in their own words, in their own space, in a comfortable environment, without them feeling any added pressures or the need to narrate their statement a certain way with law enforcement present. I know that that's not always the case, but sometimes that added pressure can affect the victim, right, in their statement. So forensic interview has definitely helped us in that manner. It has provided a comfortable environment for our victims, a calming environment for our victims. And essentially, when they're in that space, it allows them to share more details in regards to their incident, which is always beneficial for, and I'm a little nervous.
No, you're doing awesome.
Which is always beneficial for our investigation. It provides an audio and visual statement in regards to an investigation, which is also beneficial for court purposes if their case happens to make it to prosecution phase. It's great in that aspect. It allows the investigator to assess the validity and the credibility of our victims, right? Because that is very important. It also allows us to observe the emotional trauma and effect that it may have on our victims, not only on audio, but video as well. It's very impactful when you can see things. You know, a lot of people are visual persons, and not just investigators, but prosecutors, as well as the judge and jury, right? And so once again, that refers back to what I just stated as far as it being very beneficial for court purposes. And so, like I said, the list can continuously go on, but I do think it is a very benefit. It's a great benefit for the investigation purpose of a sexual assault case. And so Ms. Jen had asked me about victims, right? And so, and how it impacts them. And I thought that, you know, what would best suit this question, than to reach out to an actual victim, right? Because I'm the investigator, so I'm going to speak on my thoughts and my aspect of it. However, to answer that question or to get that true answer is better to get it from a victim. And so I reached out to a victim whom I interviewed directly, as well as she was interviewed, I believe, by Miss Jen or Miss Sydney, one of the great staff here. And she shared a few things that I thought was very beneficial for this presentation today. She did advise that as far as forensic interviews impacting victims, she said that it provided a therapeutic type environment, which allowed her to feel very reassured, right, and comfortable to share her story in regards to her sexual assault incident. It allowed her to feel less pressure, and it allowed her to take her time in providing the details of the trauma, other than feeling like she was on a certain time frame for law enforcement or having that pressure in front of her. She said, well, and so also it allowed her to have more control of the environment at hand, the time, and the information that she provided, right? She didn't feel like she had to tailor-made a certain statement for law enforcement. She was able to speak very freely. And then she advised that an interview with the investigator would actually felt very formal, felt very like by the book type of situation, which essentially kind of applied a little pressure, and not intentionally, but when you're going into a police station, it's very intimidating to walk into an environment like that to some people. So she advised that when she interviewed with me, she did feel that pressure, right? And she felt that it was a very formal interview versus just providing her statement. And so in closing, like I said, it could be many things that the forensic interview has done to help the investigation for sexual assault, but I do think that is a great asset that we are learning to really enjoy, and I hope that it stays around, you know, for a long time. And I do agree that I think that the DAs feel the same way as well. And I can't speak on every case, but you know, that's just the case.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing with our audience about how it's helped you in your investigations, hopefully. And like we talked about before, it's a collaborative effort. We wouldn't be where we are without Deputy Winters and all of the other amazing law enforcement officers that we work with on a daily basis. And it's a team effort to make sure that the victim is being treated with respect and that they're able to share their story. And then hopefully the investigation is being carried out and charges can be filed and the prosecutor can prosecute the case. So,
and some of the things that I've noticed as the interviewer is it's really helped to reinstate trust back with LE, because Deputy Winters and her team, as well as our other partners that we work with, especially Deputy Winters, she stays on site with us throughout the interview in our law enforcement viewing room. And after the interviews can be very long. We don't rush the participant in sharing what's happened to them. the participant has the opportunity after the interview is concluded to speak with law enforcement and talk through any questions they may have, and they can see that we're all working together to help them and what bring justice to what happened to them. So I think it's been a supportive tool in reinstilling trust, if trust was ever lost.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. It allows us to, it's a great way to introduce yourself to something so intimate and so impactful to you. Sexual assault is a very touchy type of case, right? And so it is a great way to create that initial interaction with the complainant, because it sends a message that we're concerned about you, right? Your physical, mental being. This is why we are recommending that, because this is a choice. We're recommending that you be forensically interviewed, because the space and is a little bit more calming and soothing, and it allows you to breathe, so to say, because a lot of times our victims have not had a chance to breathe, you know, once they've reported the incident, and we don't know the type of encounters that they've had leading up to speaking to an investigator. You know, it could have been something that rubbed them wrong, and or a person hadn't had the necessary training to know how to deal with the complainant, right? Dealing with sexual assault. And so it's so many things that could happen. They could impact the victim negatively. So I do think that a forensic interview in the initial investigative stage is a very helpful tool to kind of lead the investigation and not only gain the complainant's trust in regards to moving forward and handling their case.
And so speaking of that, we are offering, or I guess we can talk quickly about scheduling. So this is how we schedule, set up scheduling for adult forensic interviews. It's on our website. It's really hopefully user friendly.
It is amazing. And listen, I'm not hyping up you guys' program or your services just because I like Miss Jen's face, okay? You guys really have created something that is very convenient. And I'm speaking in regards to the website now, because it takes me no time. I literally just scheduled a forensic interview with the complainant this morning, and it took me less than 8 minutes to get that done. You know, without issue, without concern or pause or break in the internet system. It was a smooth transition. It really was. And so that is helpful. The little things like that is very helpful in regards to cases like this.
Good. Yeah, we want to make sure that our community partners are happy and it's seamless, as well as for our participants as well. But I wanted to highlight on the next slide that we are offering an adult forensic interviewing course, and Deputy Winters will be joining us on August 23rd through 26th. It will be live and in person. Location is at Crime Stoppers here in Houston, Texas. So it's really going to be a 4-day course about learning the fundamentals of trauma-informed interviewing. And we will have live breakout practice sessions where our individuals that come to the course can practice conducting adult forensic interviews. We'll receive live feedback from our interview team here. And then also learning, the 4th day is all about expert witness testimony and how to testify as an expert in court on some of these sensitive different victimizations and populations of individuals that we get to see here at the Forensic Center. And we were trying to target teams. And so if there's a team of individuals, you know, an advocate or a prosecutor, law enforcement that work in a community together that want to come, we are providing a discount for that teams of groups of 3 or more. So if you're interested, go to our website, tsfne.com. The next slide will have our contact info. You can always reach out to us if you have any questions, but we really hope it'll be a good course that'll help aid law enforcement as well as other individuals that are interested in conducting adult forensic interviews, learn how to do a trauma-informed interview. So the last slide is our contact information. feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Thank you so much for being here, Deputy. And so we just wanted to open it up to see if anyone had any questions. I know we have a few minutes before we conclude. Okay, well, if there's no questions, that's it for us. Again, just wanted to highlight our course that's coming up and would love to see some more.
We actually have one question.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Has there been any pushback from defense attorneys?
So we have not received any pushback yet. Granted, COVID, especially in Harris County, shut down things for quite some time. And so we are just now receiving subpoenas for different cases, but we see the adult forensic interview very similar to the children's forensic interview. So it's a discoverable item of evidence that defense can have access to. And that's really where that expert witness training is coming into play with our course. So teaching our adult forensic interviewers, law enforcement, and other partners how to testify as an expert, and working with them when they're being crossed on the stand about the forensic interview or about the interview. So the adult forensic interview cannot come into evidence. It's hearsay because we're working with adult victims. There would only be certain exceptions for any of it to come into evidence during trial. It's a witness statement. So yeah, I guess we'll see what other challenges come our way, but not at this time. Hope that answered the question. Any other questions?
What did they say?
Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you, and they thanked our deputy.
Oh,
And yeah.
All right, well, thanks y'all so much. And I'll ask everyone to ensure that if they have time to fill out the feedback form, to please do so. And thank you also to our interpreters for their work during this session.
Thank you all so
Thank
much
you all
for
very
having
much.
us.